All right, folks. Just waiting for the screen to pop up here.
All right.
Zoom room is now open for business. Hello to those of you who caught us as we just got started here. Let me get this ugly person off the screen. There we go. That's much better.
There you go. He froze.
We're going to go ahead and get started in 10 seconds. 5 seconds. 3, 2.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Zoom Room, episode 4. We are all reporting live from our homes as usual. Brandon Schaff here alongside Ta Lau, our first guest for today. And we have a lot to talk about. Later in the show, we'll have Dylan Wallace, Michael Tilka, and Bendu Yaney. And the topic today is how the coronavirus has affected the world of sports as we know it, pretty much turned everything upside down. And we've got a lot of great perspectives. Obviously, most of our perspectives here are domestic here in the U.S., but we are very fortunate to have Ta Lau with us reporting from Thailand. Ta, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's close to midnight now, but I'll power through it. I'm excited to be on the show. Thanks for having me. Let's do this.
Yeah, it's like the Tonight Show edition here. We got a late night TV. I love it. Very cool. Well, how far away is Thailand from the U.S.? Do you know the mile count?
I don't know the mile count, but I know that it takes a minimum of 3 connecting flights to get here. So you have to fly either across the Atlantic or Pacific, depending on which way you want to go. But it's quite a distance. But I've been flying a lot back and forth, so I'm quite used to all the jet lag and time zone adaptations now. Yeah.
My goodness. Well, it's a good thing you're adjusted, and we're certainly happy to have you. And, let's just get into this, Todd, because obviously things are very different across the world than they are here. The whole world is in this together. They're affected by this in a lot of the same ways, but the leagues are very different there, different sports, different athletes, different commissioners. Just talk in general, just to get started about how things have been, since you got back there.
Yeah, so the main focus today is obviously the world of international soccer and what the coronavirus has done to it. So talking from a macro perspective, all leagues except 4 worldwide have now been postponed. And right now, most leagues are continuing to come up with ways that teams can abide by and for players to follow along. However, there hasn't been much of a exact stamp yet from the FIFA on what the return date of soccer would be. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely some adjustment. And, you have been keeping track of specific leagues and, how things have been going on in different countries, even around Asia, and really around that side of the world, that hemisphere. Talking first about the Belarus League, some changes obviously coming there. What can you tell us about how that's going?
Yeah, so the Belarus League is still one of the 4 active leagues worldwide and the last standing league in Europe. Believe it or not, the league actually began on March 19, which was 1 week after the World Health Organization ruled the coronavirus as a global pandemic. So in terms of not really caring about what the rest of the world is doing, I guess Belarus is up there. Their league president, Alexander Lukashenko, came out and said that people here just hit the sauna, drink vodka, and work hard. That's all they do. And I guess that's in a nutshell how people in Belarus are dealing with the coronavirus. It's a weird case study there because with a population of 9 million and 2,000 confirmed cases, the numbers aren't that low, but we're 4 weeks into the top Premier League in Belarus now, or if you're feeling fancy, you could call it the Vyshyaya League. I'm not feeling too fancy, so I'll stick with the Belarus Premier League. But yeah, it's weird there because 2,000 confirmed cases, that's not too low, but at the same time, that's still a decent number. And 9 million population, I just hope that if the league keeps going like this and fans are allowed to come and cheer games week in, week out, I hope not more people are impacted by this and everybody stays safe. And the death count has been low, luckily, in that the region, but in terms of not caring about what other people think, Belarus, you're leading the way.
Has it been a conversation in that league that maybe they are risking it a little too much by allowing things to resume as usual?
Well, there are some critics that have really just slammed on Belarus for not listening to the rest of Europe. But if the league president comes out and say everybody drink and go to saunas and keep working hard, I
Right.
guess that's what people are going to do there. But Brandon, I'd like to shift now to a different league, also in Europe, the Bundesliga. Now, the Bundesliga, as you may know, a top 5 powerhouse in European soccer, up there with Italy, France, England, and Spain. But the Bundesliga seems to be looking to be the blueprint in terms of returning soccer in that part of Europe, because there was a breaking news that came out last week saying that it was all the articles. New York Times had a piece on it, Sports Illustrated, as well as Fox Sports. They're actually looking to resume Bundesliga in early May. The president, Christian Seifert, came out to say that they want to be leading the way. They want to be having own plans for players, for coaches, for staff, for fans to follow along and make it a safe environment for soccer to continue. The only problem, in my opinion, is that right now Germany is ranked 4th globally in terms of active cases with over 127,000. That is a very, very high number. And it's not going to reduce anytime soon. I know Europe is probably hitting its peak, if not now, then in a few weeks. But right now, players in the Bundesliga and teams have conducted small group training. So what this is, the likes of the big names, we have Bayern Munich, Dortmund, Schalke, Werder Bremen, they're all coming back, but they're training in small groups. So it's not like full on the whole team is coming together for training sessions. It's more in the terms of we have 5 or 10 guys come in the morning, then in the afternoon, then some at night. So I guess they're still being cautious, but like completely different from the Belarus Premier League. The Bundesliga is looking to be safe, but at the same time trying to get action back as soon as possible. So that's what's going on there. And if they come back, there's still 9 games to be played in that league.
And I guess it shows a little bit of a contrast between the two continents too, considering how things are, or the two countries, how things are in Europe right now and the way things have been going on, ever since it pretty much migrated, the epicenter of the virus moving to Europe there. Do you think that it's a possibility to even think about European soccer returning right now with the amount of cases that they have?
Well, there's 2 main concerns. The first, of course, in terms of a health perspective, I think no soccer should be played until probably late June or early July, just to be safe and just to make sure that nobody affects anybody in terms of going to the game, coming back home, and all that stuff. But another aspect that you have to look at it is the fact that international soccer works differently than soccer in the US. They're not franchises in international soccer. They're leagues. They're part of a league that there's promotion and relegation, and teams from lower divisions want to be playing with the top boys in the top tier, and teams in the first division don't want to be relegated to a lower division, because all having to do with money coming in from TV sponsorships, from revenue, from ticket purchases, all that kind of stuff. So it's impacting international soccer at a larger scale and at many more targets than it would then for if you put an MLS team in this situation. So there's a lot of concern having to do with not just the health part, but also the economic and the social part of what's going on in that part of the world as well.
Definitely. Well, Todd, before we let you go, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Japan with the J League. They've had their own approach to things, maybe changing up things with the relegation process. What do you think about that and what they're doing over there?
Yeah, so in Asia now, I think that the coronavirus is probably past its peak here, which I'm glad to hear that, because I am here right now. So in Japan, quite a lot of people living there, but right now I think the cases went down to only 7,000, and the league president Mitsuru Murai came out and said that in order to not punish the teams during this situation that nobody has any clear prediction about. They're actually going to skip relegation this season, meaning that teams in the top divisions won't be relegated if come the end of the season they finish in the top, in the bottom 2 or 3 rankings. And what this enables is that teams in lower league can still move up to play in the first league, but there will be an increase in teams per league in the coming seasons, which means that we're going to have a lot of teams playing in Division 1, in Division 2, and relegation will change to minimize teams in further years. However, Japan's been strong. They've come out and made a really hard stomp on this and said that health comes first. We're not going to care much about the revenue right now. We're not going to care about the TV sponsorships and all the marketing side of things and all of that. So I guess in terms of what the J League is doing, it's almost a complete opposite of what Bundesliga. Bundesliga's pushing, we want the action back. We want that action back again for our players to play, for fans to enjoy. Before J League, everybody's just saying, stay home, be safe. We'll worry about all the money thing later. Just make sure that no player, no fans, and nobody in the country gets impacted by the coronavirus.
It's definitely very interesting, and we'll see what happens as Japan starts to return to normal, along with the rest of Asia, and then the rest of the world. Hopefully, after that, will follow suit. But thank you for the perspective, Tal. We appreciate you being on.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Ta reporting from Thailand. That's awesome to get his perspective, see how things are around the rest of the world. We're going to switch to Dylan Wallace now. Dylan is joining us on the Zoom room to talk a little bit about what's been going on a little more domestically here. We'll see if we can get him to pop up. Dylan, how are you doing?
Good, Brandon. How are you, man? You'll appreciate this Devin Hester pennant right here.
Yes.
So that's
Oh my,
some good stuff.
oh, that makes me so
Some good
happy.
memories.
Always one of my favorites. And we were just talking about this last week on our least favorite sports memories, but one of my favorite sports memories is Devin Hester's return in that Super Bowl against the Colts.
Oh, I remember, man.
Oh yeah, we'll remember that.
Might have been the
for
only
the
good
rest
thing that
of our
happened in
lives.
that game, to be
Literally,
honest.
the rest of the game we can forget about, at least from a Bears perspective. But Dylan, we're talking about the coronavirus. Of course, it's been a common theme, and you've been able to get a little bit of a perspective from a more domestic standpoint, specifically from the NCAA's perspective, and up at the University of Wisconsin, how their athletic program has been handling things. Their athletic director has actually been pretty vocal about the university's approach and how he thinks that the NCAA should be approaching this as college football gets started soon and everything in between. So, what can you tell us about how things have been up north?
Yeah, so, as we know, on March 30th, the NCAA had granted spring sports seniors an extra year of eligibility if they, wish to do that. So, that's softball, that's baseball, that's track and field, tennis, and then, rowing too, I think. And so, they had the opportunity, if they wanted to, the seniors in those sports who were unable to really compete or maybe competed like just a few games this season and had to cut short, they were able to, if they want, do another year. But on April 9th, so just 4 days ago, Wisconsin Athletic Director Barry Alvarez, he had said that Wisconsin is actually not allowing their 2021, for seniors to kind of have that extra year of eligibility. He said that the NCAA overreacted by kind of giving those spring sport athletes another year. And he said, just with everything that's going on right now, with the uncertainty with sports in general, even fall sports, who knows if football's huge for them. Who knows if football will happen? But he just said with uncertainty, if you're planning to graduate, go on and graduate. We appreciate everything you've done for us, but it's time to just kind of move on. And it's interesting because we see, this is kind of it's not that easy to just be like, oh, I'm a senior, I'm just going to go another year, because you got to think on the athlete side of it. Do you want to financially try to take on a fifth year essentially? Do you want to try and do that? And also with the spring sports, how many of those athletes are really, trying to go pro or going to the next level in those kind of sports? It's kind of up in the air. And on the school side, I mean, just imagine if you have, the NCAA said they can reach into like funds to help, with scholarships for seniors wanting to do that. But just think if you had like a huge senior class, then theoretically you'd have a big freshman class coming in to replace that. And then if some of the seniors are willing to stay, then there's kind of you can have a big overflow on the rosters, scholarship wise. So things get pretty complicated. So, the Wisconsin decision isn't maybe as rash or as maybe mean as it might sound, because I think a lot of schools might follow suit with this going forward. I think Wisconsin's the first Power Five conference school to do this, but I would not be surprised if we see it more often, just because it's more complicated than just a student wanting to go one more year and play a sport.
Right. And, it's interesting with all of those freshmen that are coming in, they're not going to get nearly as potentially playing opportunities with if the seniors do decide to stay. And then you have the financial side of everything. So from your perspective, you've been a student in college too. If you were playing on a team, would it be a legitimate consideration if all these freshmen are coming in? Do you feel like I want to transfer somewhere else? I want to have the option to be able to transfer somewhere else, or do you think just stick with it and see what happens?
It's tough. I also know that I think the NCAA is working on a transfer rule too, where you would be able to like a one time, like you wouldn't have to sit out like a year like some transfers do. I think they're
Mhm.
working on that. But it's tough, and you also got to think like it's not just about and Wisconsin athletic director said this too. It's not just about sports. Like think if you're like a musical, if you're like a theater major and you didn't get to do any of your final performances in the spring, they're not getting granted any extra time. There's stuff like that. There's a bunch of other kind of people who are kind of getting robbed of things. So it gets more complicated than just a sport. So I mean, it's tough, especially with the freshmen coming in. I think about how crazy it is for them right now.
Mhm.
Trying to figure out when am I gonna be able to move into school. Think about the freshmen that graduated their high schools in December to come work out with programs and started the spring semester. They left their proms and stuff and all that stuff to come do this, and now it's kind of being taken away, and they had to go back home probably. So it's just really interesting how kind of the seniors are going to make these decisions, because it's going to be tough. One of the Wisconsin track and field runner, Allison Munson, she said she was debating whether or not to go pro or not, and she's a distance runner for Wisconsin. And
Mhm.
she said their athletic director's decision just made it easier for her because now she can just move on.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think we are really going to see this with some more schools going forward.
Yeah, there's no question. And it kind of seems like Wisconsin is really leading the way, in this effort. And, really just to finish up on the whole NCAA conversation, what is it do you think that do you think that it is the NCAA's responsibility as a overseeing organization to make a decision and just ultimately say this is the way it has to be for every single student athlete so that there is some sort of continuity when it comes to how they're approaching the situation for everybody?
Um, it's what they did when in the clause when they said on March 30th that they're going to grant 1 year of eligibility. They obviously did mention that schools can decide whether or not they actually want to, and try to kind of extend the waivers or not do it at all. And Wisconsin's one that's not going to do it. So I guess they're leaving it up to the schools essentially. But I don't know. It gets complicated. Should there have been the decision in the first place to grant spring sport athletes another year? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what went into that for the NCAA. I mean, obviously you feel for them, because they worked all this time to have that one more season, or they were transferring and they wanted to have one more season, or this could have been a good year. But it's just very complicated, and a lot of things and a lot of intangibles go into it. So, the NCAA, they did grant them, but I think it's right that they're letting schools kind of dictate what routes they want to go. So
Mhm.
not every school is going to have to deal with this kind of issue of what are we going to do with seniors, incoming freshmen, how are we going to manage the scholarships, how does that affect the 2022 class, because now we have more things. What we were looking at one players, but now we can only take less. So it just gets more complicated. So it's I will say it's good that the NCAA did allow kind of schools to make their own decisions on whether or not they want to bring seniors on or not. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's at least one good thing that we'll probably see a fluctuation of whether or not this is going to happen across schools and colleges over the U.S.
Yeah, it'll certainly affect a lot from the top down. And we do have one question from YouTube. Someone asked, do you think Wisconsin is more okay with this stance because they don't have a baseball program?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, maybe obviously if you probably look at all the spring sports, um, revenue wise or talent wise, I think the softball and baseball are probably the two biggest ones. So not having a baseball team, less athletes to manage. I know baseball's you got a pretty decent sized roster, so I don't know. I mean, that could be potentially true. But I don't know. I don't know about that. I'm not going to speak for Wisconsin or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. And Wisconsin is a school that it's like we said, money's a lot of big part of it. They're losing out on, as many schools are, losing out on revenue because their basketball team didn't go to the NCAA tournament. And like I said, if falls don't happen, on revenue. So one of the main points for Ari Alvarez, what he said was essentially, we can't promise you anything because of how uncertain the future is with sports. So, just go, if you're a senior, just go on and move on with your life, because we can't make any promises because we don't know what's going to happen, which I think is essentially fair. None of us really know what's going to happen right now. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of been the sentiment around the NCAA and really around the sports world in general. But very interesting, and we'll see what happens, of course. But thank you for your perspective, Dylan. We appreciate that.
No problem, Brandon. All right. See ya.
Yeah. Thank you. So moving ahead to Michael Tilka now, we're going to transition to the pros. We have some NFL conversation to talk about. If we get Michael on board. There he is. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Brandon?
Very well. At home, as usual. I see you are too. The backdrop is the same.
Yep. Still in my my lovely kitchen in Bettendorf, Iowa right now. I think this is the first time I did a full facial shave this morning for the first time in weeks, because I had a very lackluster mustache, but I wanted to keep it professional and at least from the chest up to make sure I was looking the part for the analysis today.
I know I got a little bit of a stubble going, but we make it work. We let it grow as long as it can until it becomes visual.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I also appreciate the Happy Easter in the background. A little you got it up. Very good.
Right above the fridge. Happy Easter, happy Passover to those who celebrate.
Yes, sir. Well, we are here to talk about your perspective on the NFL and their approach to everything that's been happening with the coronavirus. Obviously, the NFL draft is coming up in just a week or two, so there is really a lot to be figured out, especially, talking about doing the entire draft online, how that could potentially affect the way things go, the risks that could come with that. What has been your perspective and what have you found out about how things are going on in the NFL?
Yeah, and you really hit the nail on the head. Obviously, a lot of concerns with the NFL draft coming a week from Thursday. So in about 10 days, we'll be getting sort of our first sense of normalcy back in sports, even though there's going to be absolutely nothing normal about this year's NFL draft. Earlier in the year, it was announced that the NFL draft was going to be this big, absolutely phenomenal spectacle in Las Vegas, with Oakland moving there starting this fall. So obviously a big stance on, the grand show and spectacle of Las Vegas. The stage is going to be floated. Draft picks are going to be coming in via boat. And obviously those plans are out the window now. Just yesterday, Roger Goodell announced that he would be announcing the draft picks from his basement in Bronxville, New York. So a lot of people pointing out that it would be the first time that he would not be booed doing the opening pick of the NFL draft. But a lot of other major concerns outside of, just how the draft itself is going to be handled. A lot of cybersecurity concerns amongst these teams that a lot of teams won't be meeting at their team facilities. And so you have, so many different people in your war room. Typically you can have between a dozen to 20 people, and you have them scattered across various locations in their own homes. It's difficult to have that communication. And on top of that communication, there's also concerns with privacy and hacking going on, potential cyber threats of figuring out where some of these agents or coaches live and getting inside information on what teams are going to pick, being able to negotiate trades and that sort of thing. And there's also been a lot of concerns from general managers as well. Specifically, there's been this push to try and delay the NFL draft. Not too long ago, GM Group unanimously requested to the NFL to push back the start time of the NFL draft, or there was other reports of perhaps giving each NFL team 3 additional picks as sort of a blanket way to say, you don't get this extra time to go in with some of these athletes and get to sit down with them, evaluate, interview, really get to pick their brain to see if this is an athlete that you think is worthwhile in drafting. So it gives them the opportunity to take more players and be able to sit down, sort of evaluate more at a later stage. And obviously this whole process and a lot of issues, just in general with the amount of picks they're doing, the preparedness, and even for more veteran teams and more veteran players, obviously a lot of shifting has gone on in the NFL this year. Cam Newton's not returning to Carolina. Obviously, Tom Brady leaving New England for the first time in 20 some odd years. Nick Foles going to Chicago. A lot of moving parts to where there's a clear advantage for teams. Your Russell Wilsons in Seattle, your Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. These groups that have a lot more chemistry in the way they work because they've been together so long. So you have these teams who are switching up systems, switching up coaches, more specifically quarterbacks learning new systems. They're at a disadvantage because they aren't able to use this time to, get together with their receivers or their offenses or their coordinators, being able to hash out new ideas, getting that ability to introduce themselves to each other, build that chemistry. So it's going to be really interesting to see if there's a lot of turnover between the teams that have succeeded in the 2019 season to the 2020 season. But obviously, it's going to be a really interesting thing to evaluate come the NFL draft in just 10 days.
Yeah, seriously. And the clock is really ticking for them to make a decision on this. As of right now, they're still planning on doing everything on the day. It's all online. And, a big conversation now is the potential security risks that come with doing everything online now. And the possibility that there are people out there who are very tech savvy, who could figure out the way that the NFL is trying to do this, as secure as it may seem. And maybe that could affect things and potentially have disastrous consequences.
Absolutely. And you're talking about, like I was saying earlier, war rooms that can have a dozen to 24 people. And obviously when you spread that, as some of you might have experienced from your Zoom conversations, whether it be for work or for school, when you put that many people in a quote unquote conference room to try and discuss, potential millions of dollars of losses or gains by deciding on which players they're going to take. Obviously, a lot of miscommunication can go on. And then, like you said, there's been security issues with Zoom and potential hackings and Zoom bombings in which people or Zoom raids, in which people are finding Zoom conversations and flooding the conversations going on there. So there's been an uptick in concerns of internet and IT. So you're exactly right there, Brandon.
What do you think about the NFL's approach to all this, the way they've been communicating with the owners and the GMs? Who does it really seem like is actually making the decisions here?
Obviously, it's really big in the NFL's favor rather than the team's favor. Like what Todd was talking about earlier, a lot of these European soccer teams, a lot of the power is held in the hands of the clubs themselves, of the teams themselves. Obviously, pros and cons to either system. But I think what people fail to realize is that the NFL is in full control on this one. And the other thing people fail to realize is that they do their best to have some sort of storyline going on for every month of the year. Obviously, September to December, you have the season itself going on. January, you have the playoffs. February, you do the Super Bowl, and then the NFL draft later that month, or perhaps in early March, depending on how the calendar falls. April, you get the NFL draft. In May, you have continued free agency. And then June, July, obviously with training camp, OTAs, and then August being the preseason. So the NFL has a very robust, more than what people realize, the NFL has a very robust and strict schedule that they themselves have to adhere to. And they're trying their best to keep normalcy as possible. And obviously it's come with backlash from players and franchises as well, especially, when you have players coming into the NFL draft who are a bit unproven. They come from perhaps a smaller program, smaller conference, and they don't have that ability to speak with executive GMs. A great anecdote I was researching last night was back in 2007 when Darrelle Revis was coming out of a shaky Big East conference when Pittsburgh was still in it. The Jets had a lot of doubts and weren't really convinced so much that Darrelle Revis could be the elite corner that he turned out to be. But they said the difference that Darrelle Revis made was that when they brought him into New York for interviews to sit down, sort of pick his brain, they absolutely fell in love with him to the point that they even traded up to get him. And obviously that was a move that paid off in the end. So getting this ability to sit down with players, and especially injured players as well. The first person that comes to my mind, Tua Tagovailoa, absolutely going to be a first-round pick. But where is he going to fall because of that concern with his hip injury, and that teams aren't able to sit down and say, all right, what exactly is the situation going on here? When are you going to be most ready to play? Do you feel 100% getting to really pick his brain and figure out where he's at in his rehab process? Obviously, video came out just last week of his very private workout session at an anonymous location in Nashville, Tennessee. So it's certainly interesting to see how this affects not only players that had more to prove with their pro days and their personal workouts and interviews, and those like Tua that are coming off of injuries, and there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding some of these people. So that's why you see suggestions to do things like adding 3 additional picks in the NFL draft this year.
Right. And Tua Tagovailoa is really the perfect example of how this really affects everybody, because Tua is one of the biggest names coming out of college football right now as we know it. You know, they had this big thing, you know, last week where they showed his interview with Jerry Jones, you know, kind of talking about how things were, you know, the behind the scenes aspect of talking to all these quarterbacks. And, you know, Nick Saban, you know, his college coach, even talking about how, you know, obviously you can have people like him, people like Saban speaking on his behalf, which helps. But for a lot of these smaller players, you don't necessarily get that.
Yeah, and Tua himself even cited that it's very difficult, even though they still have this ability to sit down and do video conferencing and things like that, that not being able to be in the same room, obviously some technical limitations, because some of these NFL coaches and GMs, they might not be as technically savvy as they'd like to be in terms of being able to play video, watch film, rewind, fast forward, you know, things like that. So it does present a barrier for those players to try and build a more emotional or chemistry type connection between, you know, the people that are going to be in charge of picking them and making sure that they're their first day picks rather than second day picks. So it's very important, and it's certainly going to make a lasting effect for years to come, especially with, you know, you take a player in this draft you thought was going to be spectacular, and then years down the line they turn out to be a bust, and that's because you didn't get the opportunity to really sit down with them, have that face-to-face talk, or know about their health. So it's this year's draft is certainly going to have ripple effects for years to come.
Yeah. And a final word on the NFL, Michael. You know, Adam Schefter, Adrian Wojnarowski, they reported last week, you know, or maybe 2 weeks ago, that the NFL is looking to maybe resume operations in either August or September. That's when they would like to see things. Do you think that is a realistic timeline to start to see things actually return to normal, or do you think it might be even later than that?
You see, that's the $1 million question right there, is that no one necessarily knows outside of, you know, maybe a few health experts. No one in the general population, whether you're an NFL GM or you're an NFL player or an NFL fan like us, you know, you don't know when things can return to quote unquote normalcy. And it's something that's going to have to be taken, you know, weeks at a time or days at a time with new data, new developments, especially with the hardworking people in the medical community doing everything they can to try and resume some normalcy here. But yeah, there has been a lot of words about being determined to return to some type of season, whether it be, you know, I think best case scenario, you could see a situation where they do play a full season in these stadiums, but without fans. I think that's what could become as sort of a compromise with the NFL season this year. And obviously there's a big push for how much money the NFL brings in, that they want to still play the season. They want to still broadcast these games, but it's still out of their hands. I think that's something that we all need to remember, is that all these decisions from these leagues, at least domestically in the United States, all these decisions by leagues are out of their hands until they hear some sort of news or updates from the CDC. So obviously determined, NFL wants to get games played, but
yes,
it's out of their hands on this one.
Yeah, certainly, Michael. Well, thank you so much for the perspective. Obviously, the health of all these guys is at the forefront of this. That's why all this is happening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael. So there's our NFL perspective. We're going to switch to Bendu Yaney for our final perspective here, this time talking about how it's been from a student athlete perspective. Bendu has been playing women's basketball at Indiana for the past few years, and she has just announced recently that she will be transferring to another school to continue her career. Bendu, how are you doing? You are muted right now. If you could turn that off. There we go. Perfect.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you doing?
Very good. Very good. Back at home?
Yeah, no, I'm actually in Bloomington right now, packing up my apartment.
Oh, wow. Well, how's that process been?
Long, very long.
I know. Is it a ghost town right now? Nobody there?
Yeah, no, nobody's here, literally. And there's so much construction. Like when I left, there was like not that much. And then now coming back, there's like construction everywhere.
Right. Yeah, because it's the perfect time for everybody to be taking care of all that. But, you know, you're moving your stuff out. Obviously, you're going to be, you know, heading back home, you know, and obviously you're going to be starting, you know, in the fall at a different school playing. So, you know, just talking about how this has affected you from an athlete standpoint, you know, you have been, in the Big Ten, and now you're obviously going to see how this goes, in another section of the country too. So what do you think from your perspective, how all of this has been handled?
It's been crazy, especially with dealing with like the NCAA and the transfer process. So obviously I picked my school. I'm going to be heading to Arizona, but I was supposed to be signing April 15th. But now the dead period to have like on campus recruits and off campus recruits has got extended to May 31st. So now it's like an unknown of when I'm actually going to be signing because of the fact that I'm not really supposed to sign during the dead period. And so I don't know if the NCAA is going to have like a little period of time that helps or lets the transfers like sign or what's going to happen. But then if I don't get to sign until like May 31st, I'm supposed to be reporting to, if everything goes well, to Arizona on June 1st. So it's kind of like a big like empty gap that I'm not going to know if I'm really able to sign. And also with not being able to sign in April, I don't get my stipend when school ends. So basically my stipend here ends as soon as the semester ends. And then my stipend there is supposed to start whenever this semester ends. So if I don't get to sign until May 31st, I won't have any money basically, which is crazy. And that's everybody who's dealing with the transfer process right now.
Yeah, and it certainly complicates everything. But, have you heard, because obviously you're in contact with, your coaches and, your potential teammates and your current teammates and coaches, how was it back when they first started announcing that everything was going to be affected in the NCAA? How is it going forward, as you're going to be potentially starting a new season now?
It's been very hectic, especially with like Arizona and how they were going to make it to the tournament, and like everybody who wanted to go to the tournament, it's kind of like they got shut down. And like even with the seniors, they kind of don't know what their next step is because of the fact that the NCAA, there was talk about maybe coming back for another year, but then it didn't make sense because of the winter sports already played the whole season basically. And so with everything happening, there's been a lot of transfers. Obviously I'm included, but there's been a lot of transfer, and there's been talking to my head coach and also talking to Sean Miller. He, from the men's side, he said that both sides there's been 60% more transfers than usual. And it's also because of this new rule that's going to probably be in place with the one-time transfer rule. So it's really, there's a lot of shifts going around in the NCAA men's and women's basketball.
Yeah, and we were talking, I'm sure you heard with Dylan earlier about how Wisconsin, had their perspective on all this, and how this is really going to be interesting to see how it affects recruiting with all the freshmen coming in. And obviously you're an upperclassman, so you're going to be getting a heck of a lot more minutes than a lot of these recruits. So, what do you think from their perspective and really from yours, because, you're there, you're still going to be a senior, so it's not like you're getting that extra year, but you still are trying to figure out how that's going to work from a team chemistry standpoint?
I think it's still kind of, it's like when you're a grad transfer. It's like when somebody comes in for 1 year and like basically gets a lot of minutes. Like freshmen, when they come in, a lot of them, unless they're like a 5-star, don't really expect to play that many minutes. So they kind of already know they're going to have to take a backseat to a grad transfer or like a senior or even an upperclassman. So I think that a lot of freshmen kind of know that, and especially with this stuff going on, it's like there's not really much movement with like our roster, like our chemistry, because basically it's like freshmen know who freshmen are and the upperclassmen know who upperclassmen are, and like the freshmen are going to follow the upperclassmen, and that's kind of how it's always going to work, even if this whole thing wasn't happening. It's just how it works.
Yeah, then that's what I was going to say. So even with all of this going on, it's still the same natural hierarchy.
Yeah, it's still the same thing. The freshmen are going to follow the leaders basically, and then we're going to have to lead the freshmen, and that's how it is.
Yeah. And, obviously with Indiana, you were on the Indiana team, and, this was a team that very much looked like it was going to be, in the conversation to do some damage in March, and all of this happens, out of nowhere, from the teammates who, and you're friends with, what was it like for them just knowing that, hey, and unfortunately didn't finish the way we wanted it to?
Well, when I talked to them, this is the crazy thing, is they're getting ready to go into a lift, and then somebody checked their phone right before the lift and saw that the tournament had been canceled. And then obviously when it's on Twitter, some people they think it's real, but then also you don't know because of the fact that you have to have a real source. And then so when that happened, everybody kind of scrambled and then started calling people. And then they realized, the coaches finally called in when they were like mid-list and said, yeah, this is true. We're going to have a team meeting as soon as we get back, and kind of like explain everything. But everybody was heartbroken, especially Brenna, because she was the only senior. And then obviously being a transfer in her first year being able to play, she went to the tournament. So her senior year, she wanted to, continue that trend and go to the tournament and finish out her year playing in the NCAA tournament, which is every senior's dream. And it kind of got cut short. And, like, she obviously is not going to play basketball after college, and it kind of sucks because her last memory is losing when it could have been something more spectacular.
Yeah, and it is certainly disappointing, and it's been that way for so many different athletes in all their different sports. It's been the big conversation, but at least it was as great of a season as it was so far. And you have your friends on the team. You also have friends who could potentially be entering the NBA draft this year. From their perspective, what do you think is going through their minds as they really go on to the next chapter, which could be a very significant one for them?
Yeah. So I talked to my friend Peyton Pritchard from the Oregon Ducks. He just won the National Point Guard of the Year. And he's obviously projected to be a draft pick this year. And he thinks this whole thing is crazy. Last year, he even went and tested the waters. And obviously last year he was been able to fly out and do workouts with the team and got to meet the organization and staff. This year it's a little different. Even though they know who he is, he still wanted to go and work out and do the combine and things like that. That's what he was looking forward to. But now they've been doing a lot of Zoom conversations, and he said they've been sitting there on Zoom and watching his film, which his games, you don't win an award like a National Point Guard award if you're not a good point guard, but he still wants to be able to kind of show his talents, but he's not going to be able to. But he says that they think that the draft may still continue in person because it's at the end of June kind of, but he still doesn't, it's still an uncertainty, and he still has an unknown of what's really going to happen.
Yeah. Has he been in contact with some of the organizations to see if there is some sort of alternative way that he can stay in contact with them, potentially do some workouts? Has there been anything from that side of it?
Yeah. So with the workouts, it's kind of hard because of like technology and like Wi-Fi and things like that. So he can't really go to a gym, and all the gyms in Oregon are closed. So he can't go to a gym and try to work out and like record himself working out, or even like having them watch him work out on Zoom. So it's been more of them just watching film and critiquing him through Zoom on film. And so he's been able to have conversations with the organization and things like that, but he doesn't get to have that in person contact like he wanted to.
Yeah. Well, it certainly changes a lot. And, it's just the way that it's been, and it really, just to finish up the whole, conversation from the student athlete, going on to the pros, or even just figuring out everything, as their future looms, especially, for you going to Arizona now, what do you think is going to be different now as we head into almost a new era, of sports, whether we have fans or we don't, whether, we're able to see things go back to exactly the same way or not? How do you think it's going to be different when things start to finally resume in the fall?
Honestly, I think it won't be as different if everything starts to clear up, especially because I'm a winter sport. So it's like my sport doesn't really start until October. So I'm thinking that everything should be kind of ready to go by October. If not, it's going to be really weird not having like fans in November watch our games. But even like going for summer school, everything's kind of different because we don't know if we're actually going to be able to report to school on June 1st. So it's kind of like there's still that unknown, and even going throughout a couple more months, like we still don't know if it's going to be cleared up. So it's kind of like we don't really know about our season and if we're going to have fans. Like we're hoping that everything goes well, so then our women's and men's basketball, even football, are able to play. But if it doesn't happen, then it's going to be kind of weird. With no sports, and it's going to be weird with no sports until whenever.
Yeah.
So
yeah, until we see everything. And obviously, like we've been talking about through the whole show, we got to take it day by day, and we'll see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One step at a time.
Exactly. Well, Bendu, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, there is Ben Nuyeni, and that's everybody for today's episode of the Zoom Room. We were happy you were able to join us for the live stream here on YouTube, and it's been really fun to do all of these. So we're really looking forward to keeping the content coming throughout the whole week. We'll have 2 more episodes, one on Wednesday and one on Friday, that will be streamed here live on YouTube. You'll see the links on Twitter and across social media for IU Sports Media. And we were happy to have you here today. We'll see you again on Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.